So polyvagal theory, have people heard of this at all? Got one shake of the head. Good. I like that we're all at a similar level. We can just dive in from the bottom. So with that in mind, the objectives are for us to learn a bit more about it, understand it. Then I'm going to guide us through an exercise to apply it to ourselves, see what that's like. Then I hope to give us some time to reflect on how we apply this to our client work. So this guy, Stephen Porges, is he came up with polyvagal theory, proposed it in 1994, published his book on it in 2011, which is a challenging read. And then he wrote a slightly more readable book in 2017, The Pocket Guide to Polyvagal Theory. So he's the big name in all of this. Deb Dana, whereas Stephen Porges, I don't believe he's a clinician. I think he's I think he's a researcher. Whereas Deb Dana, she's a therapist who's taken his theory and written about it specifically for psychotherapy. So if you wanted to just read the one book on it, I'd probably recommend this one if it was about psychotherapy specifically you're interested in. So those are the two big names. What is it? I'll go into a little bit of definition, but firstly, just the word. Poly means many, and vagal refers to vagus, the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that comes out the back of our head and branches off. So it's like a branch of many nerves that come out of our head. That's what the actual polyvagal means. And then the theory about it we'll get into. So this is from Stephen Porges. He says that polyvagal theory links the evolution of the mammalian autonomic nervous system to social behavior and emphasizes the importance of physiological state in the expression of behavioral problems and psychiatric disorders. I've translated that to be a theory about the role of our autonomic nervous system responses to perceptions of safety, threat, and danger. So first question in that becomes, well, what's the autonomic nervous system? Autonomic basically means what is involuntary. So our autonomic nervous system is the bit of our nervous system which controls all our involuntary processes. So you might choose to clasp a pen voluntarily, but you don't choose to digest your food. Your nervous system will take care of that for you, sending signals to your digestive system. So you don't have to think about it. So this picture here shows, it's connected to our eyes, our hearts, I believe that's a lung, maybe is that a liver, stomach, bowels, intestines, genitals. So we've got this, our nervous system's not just our brain, but it goes all over our body, and specifically the autonomic part of the nervous system is that which controls all our involuntary processes. Is that okay so far? And as you can probably see from the picture, it's split into two parts. So the sympathetic nervous system originates in our spinal cord here. And it's all about, well, this is what Deb Dana says. The sympathetic branch is found in the middle part of the spinal cord, represents the pathway that prepares us for action. It responds to cues of danger and triggers the release of adrenaline, which fuels the fight or flight response. So here's some pictures of the sympathetic nervous system on full whack. So what you'll probably see in common with all these guys is that there's lots of energy in the system. Our muscles are fueled up. So when our sympathetic nervous system comes on, we breathe faster to take in more oxygen. Our heart beats faster to get that oxygen to our muscles. Blood goes more to our major muscle groups than to other parts of the body. We might turn the digestive system off because it's not important at that point. So, people talk about shitting themselves scared. That's why, because sometimes it can just turn off the digestive system. So it's when we've perceived some sort of danger and our body builds energy in order to fight it off or run from it. And it's not just as simple as on or off, but you can be slightly anxious, which means your nervous system's on a little bit, or you can be in a full-blown panic attack or rage or something, which means it's on full blast. Is that okay with people on that side of the nervous system? Great. The other side of our autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic. So if you think of the sympathetic nervous system as the accelerator, the parasympathetic can be considered the brake. So this is the part that's on, that slows us down, has us breathe slower, regulates our heart rate, and it's generally associated with things like resting and digesting, feeding and breeding, restoration and repair, fighting infections. I read about a study recently where they took people, measured their stress response over a number of days and injected them with the cold virus. And people who were more stressed, so where their sympathetic nervous system was on more, they all got the virus. They all got a cold. Whereas people who had a lot more parasympathetic activity were much less likely to actually catch a cold, even though they had the virus sprayed up their nose. So yeah, we need to, this is a good place to be with COVID being around to fight off infections. We need our parasympathetic nervous system on to do all the stuff that is for our long-term gain, whereas sympathetics like just get out of here or fight short-term gains. But it's a bit more complicated than that, and that's where the vagus nerve comes in. So if I just go back to this picture, you see the nerves from the parasympathetic nervous system either start here in kind of the base of the spine, the sacral area, or here from the back of our head, the underbelly of the brain. So this, the vagus nerve, which is what we're talking about in polyvagal theory, is this part. It's the part of the parasympathetic nervous system, and it's the nerve that's one of 12 nerves that comes out the back of our head, basically. So we have, I think it's 12 cranial nerves, which do various things. Some go to your eyes and move your eye muscles around. Some go to your ears, your nose, your mouth. But the vagus nerve goes all the way around your body. So vagus means wandering. So that's why they call it the wandering nerve. And it's part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you think about the hierarchy, we've got the nervous system generally. The autonomic nervous system is a part of the nervous system in general. The sympathetic and parasympathetic are both part of the autonomic nervous system. So the sympathetic being the accelerator, parasympathetic being the brake. And the vagus nerve is one piece of the parasympathetic nervous system. There we go. And then this itself is divided into two parts, which they've named the ventral vagal pathway and the dorsal vagal pathway. So if you just see in this picture here, we've got kind of two of these yellow nerves coming off the back of this woman's brain. One of them is coming all the way down into her guts and stomach area, and this other one's coming down into her chest, lungs, heart area. So the dorsal vagal pathway responds to cues of extreme danger. It takes us out of connection, out of awareness, and into a protective state of collapse. When we feel frozen, numb, or not here, the dorsal vagus has taken control. Most cells originating in the dorsal pathway project to the subdiaphragmatic structures. So sub meaning under, diaphragmatic referring to the diaphragm, just the muscle just beneath your lungs. So this dorsal vagal nerve goes to our stomach, intestines, the guts down there. And it's whereas our sympathetic nervous system responds to cues of threat we can potentially escape from or get away from or fight away. If that doesn't work, the dorsal vagal turns on and has us collapse and withdraw, dissociate perhaps. So it's kind of like go to fight or flight if you can do something, if you can get rid of the threat, escape the threat, fight the threat. But if you can't, if you're absolutely trapped, you're helpless, you're hopeless, then this is our kind of last port of call. So you see here, this mouse is, if we're assuming it's alive, then it's playing dead in this cat's mouth. And that will be its, it's not fighting, it's not struggling. That's its dorsal pathway online. These people here looking kind of zoned out, spaced out, withdrawn. That's the kind of place our body goes into when our dorsal turns on. And like the sympathetic, you can be a little bit anxious into a full-blown panic attack. You can be a little bit spaced out or be off in some full-blown dissociation where you're completely not there at all. So it's not just on or off, but it's a spectrum. And we can switch between the two quite quickly. You might be, I don't know, kind of zoned out, like this woman seems to be here, and someone gives you a comment and you snap back and go back into sympathetic and get to a rage, right? So it's we can swap between them quite quickly. Whereas the ventral vagus, so the other pathway, the ventral vagal pathway responds to cues of safety and supports feelings of being safely engaged and socially connected. Most cells in the ventral pathway project the supradiaphragmatic structures, so above the diaphragm. So our larynx, pharynx, soft palate, so all our vocal apparatus, esophagus, bronchi, so in the lungs and the heart. So kind of from your throat and your chest, that's where the ventral vagus stuff kicks in. And it's all about feeling socially safe and connected. And we can, for that reason, we sometimes call it our social engagement system. So humans require long-term social independences to survive. So we need other people. Therefore, isolation is traumatic. So the ability to identify a safe environment and safe other people is necessary for mammals to turn off defensive systems, i.e. your sympathetic and your dorsal, in order to parent and express appropriate social behavior and other things like regulate your emotions. So we need to be in our ventral vagal pathway for health, growth, restoration, accessing our higher brain structures. So, you'll probably know that if you're in a rage or if you're kind of zoned out, you don't really have access to your critical rational faculties, all this frontal cortex stuff. It's kind of, there's no blood going there if we're in a big rage or if we're dissociated. So social safety, the experience of social safety is necessary for, all this good stuff. That's not to say that we have to be around people all the time. You can be in your ventral vagus on your own, but you would have learnt to have done that. So a baby probably wouldn't be able to be in the ventral vagus on their own, because as soon as they're alone, they're not safe, right? But if we have, once we've built some independence, if we've had attachment figures that have built where we've developed to feel safe, then at some point in childhood, we can learn to also feel safe when a parent's not in the room. And then eventually we can even live on our own and be in the ventral vagus system. So when I say social safety, it doesn't necessarily mean you're literally with people. Stephen Porges came up with this word neuroception, I guess, to replace perception, because this is our autonomic nervous system. It's not like we rationally think, oh, there's a threat, and then it cues on. It's like our autonomic nervous system, again, is involuntary, and sometimes it will turn on our sympathetic or our dorsal, and we won't really know why. It might kind of be out of our awareness. But our nervous system has somehow found a cue that we're not safe. So that's why he came up with this word, basically. So it's like some part of our body has found a trigger, a cue that is not safe, but it's not necessarily conscious. So rather than saying that we perceive threat, we say we neuroceive threat. Could be overcomplicating things, but that sort of makes sense to people. Yeah. So the ways our autonomic nervous system responds to cues of safety, danger, and life threat from within our bodies, in the world around us, and in our connections to others. Different from perception, this is a detection without awareness, a subcortical experience happening far below the realm of conscious thought. So, you might be feeling anxious and not really be aware of it or why. You might be feeling kind of spaced out and not necessarily know or know why you're feeling that way. So we can take all these three bits of the nervous system we've talked about and stick them on a ladder, and then we have a nice model to look at. So at the top of the ladder here, we have our ventral vagal pathway, our social engagement system, where we feel safe, connected, social perhaps. We can laugh, play, have fun, smile. Then a few steps down the ladder, we go into, that's where our sympathetic is represented. So this is where we're mobilized to take action into our fight or flight system. And then if we feel we're in this for too long, we're trapped in it, we feel hopeless, helpless, we drop down into this immobilized, collapsed, shut down dorsal vagal pathway. So because this is where we go, the bottom of the ladder, when we feel there's no hope of escape, when we're trapped, that's why it can be common to this can be the link between anxiety and depression. So if you're anxious, you're spending a lot of time in the sympathetic. Eventually your body's going to decide, well, we're obviously trapped and hopeless, and shut down, collapse, essentially hibernate. And then that can turn into a depression. Perhaps something then triggers that and the person gets anxious again, they come back up here, and they're just sort of knocking between the two. So this was from Deb Dana's book. I just got a couple of examples of people's experiences going up and down this ladder. So this woman says, I'm driving to work in the morning, listening to the radio and enjoying the beginning of the day. So she's at the top of the ladder, enjoying the day, listening to the radio. Again, she's not literally with people, but her social engagement system is online. Then a siren sounds behind me, so I quickly move down the ladder. I feel my heart race and immediately worry I've done something wrong. So a cognitive element there. Now we're staying in the sympathetic system. I pull over, the police car rushes by me. I pull back out and resume my drive to work and feel my heart begin to return to its normal speed. So the threat's passed, and now she's moving back up the ladder. By the time I get to work, I've forgotten about the incident and I'm ready for my day. Back to the top of the ladder. It's a very simple example of someone dropping into the sympathetic and then climbing back up. A bit more of a complicated one. So I'm having dinner with friends, enjoying the conversation and the fun of being out with people I like. So starting at the top of the ladder. The conversation turns to vacations and I start comparing my situation to my friends' situations. I begin to feel angry that I can't afford a vacation and my job doesn't pay enough, that I have so many unpaid bills, I'll never be able to take a vacation. So some anger kicking in now. That's the sympathetic system coming online. I sit back and watch as my friends continue to talk about trips and travel planning. I disconnect from the conversation and begin to feel invisible as the talk goes on around me. So this is now going to the bottom of the ladder, to the dorsal place. Where there was energy in the anger, there's now a lack of energy in the shutdown. The evening ends with my friends still not noticing my silence and with me feeling like a misfit in the group. So getting even deeper into the dorsal there. I go home and crawl into bed. The only place I know now is the bottom of the ladder. The next morning, I wake up and don't want to get up or go to work. Still at the bottom. I worry I'll get fired if I don't show up and drag myself out of bed. A bit of energy coming back in now, which indicates climbing up the ladder. I'm late for work. My boss comments on my lateness, and I have a hard time holding in an angry response. Okay, so she's in a sympathetic now with the anger. I've decided I've had enough of this job and will seriously look for a new one. So still energy there, moving up the ladder, but to a more positive place. I begin to consider the skills I can bring to a new job, and that with the right job, I will be able to pay my bills and maybe even take a vacation. I have lunch with a coworker, and we talk about our jobs and dreams for the future. So back in the social engagement system towards the top of the ladder. Cool. I plan now just to offer you guys an invitation to sort of map some of these experiences out for yourself. But before I do so, I'm wondering if people have any thoughts, reflections, questions about this vagus nerve and the places on the ladder and everything I've discussed so far. I should point out that freeze can be confused. I've learned this recently and it's made a lot of sense to me, so I'll try and get it across. If you imagine a deer in a headlights freezing, that's that type of freeze where like your muscles are quite contracted and tense, which suggests sympathetic, right? Because we're still sort of mobilized. We just don't, it's like we're freezing in a stone-like way. So, a big noise happens and you haven't decided what to do yet. You might get into that freeze state. That type of freeze is sympathetic. Whereas the mouse playing dead, it's not like frozen like that, is it? It's limp. Its muscles are not contracted. And that's, we can call that collapse or shutdown, but sometimes people refer to that as freeze as well. So they're different states. You can have your contracted tight freeze or your kind of collapsed dorsal place. So my suggestion here was going to be to sort of guide you through just mapping this out for yourself, so it's not just an intellectual exercise. I'm not going to ask you specifically to share anything, but if you want to, I invite you to kind of write down some suggestions I'm about to give. So if this is the ladder, this mapping the ladder exercise is from Deb Dana's book, by the way. So she gives this, you've got the ladder here, and then these sort of spaces to write your reflections in. So I guess I invite you to, if you've got pen or paper with you, just to make a heading of sympathetic. And I invite you to recall a time where you felt the sense of the sympathetic mobilizing energy moving through you. You might feel a sense of too much energy flooding your system, a sense of unease, perhaps a sense of being overwhelmed. And you might think one thing will put you over the edge. Now, just let some of this energy from this memory kind of come into your system. And just under that heading, a sympathetic, write a few words about your experience. So, when you were there in that memory, when you're in that sympathetic place, whether it was, frustration or anxiety, wherever you were, where was that happening in your body? What was happening in those places? What kind of words or metaphors might sum up those experiences? Just give yourself a minute or two to jot down some words that represent that experience. What type of sensations were they? Things like buzzing, energy, or pressure, tension, things like that might come to mind. Some people feel anxiety much more in their stomachs, some more in their chest. Different aspects of the nervous system show themselves up differently for each of us, even though we have the same basic blueprint. And in mapping this, it might be interesting to, once you've kind of done the bodily aspects, write a few words about the types of the kind of thinking you were in this moment. Not necessarily quoting the thoughts themselves, but were the thoughts fast, or do you notice a particular type of cognitive distortion you go to, or were they repetitive, something like that? Were they predictions of the future? Were they mental rehearsals, ruminations of the past? Name calling, self-criticism, those types of thinking processes. Judging others, perhaps. The idea is to use a specific memory, but in order for us to get a general sense of this part of our nervous system. You all look quite engaged, but because I'd like some time for discussion, I'm going to move on, and we can perhaps carry on afterwards if you want to, your Friday afternoons. So now we're going to move to get to know our dorsal vagal place a bit. So similar, same exercise, but different part of the nervous system. So think of a time, a memory, when you felt the dorsal vagal sense of disconnect, a sense of collapse. So in this place, there's not enough energy to run through your system. For example, if you were in a room full of people, it might feel like there was a plexiglass shield between you and everyone else, like you were disconnected somehow. You could see them, but you just couldn't reach them. Might feel like a depression. In this place, it's hard to find hope. Just let a tiny bit of this into your mind and body through a memory, and just get a small taste of it. And then similar exercise, begin starting to map it. We might start, so if you might write just the heading of dorsal, something like that, and then start mapping some of the words that represent how this feels in your body. So, you might be in an argument with someone, a partner or something, and all the sympathetics online, and there's just a point where you just give up, like there's no way I'm ever going to be heard, and you just sink into that withdrawn space, something like that. Where does that feel in your body? What type of feeling is it? Heaviness, perhaps, a draining, a numbness, maybe it's no feeling whatsoever. That might make sense. Is it in your guts or chest, perhaps in your face or eyes as you zone out a little, dissociate a bit? There might be particular metaphors that come to mind that map this quite well for you, that represent this place for you. So this is the place in that example where that woman was at the dinner party when she tuned out from the conversation after getting angry and just withdrew to be by herself, even though the conversation was still going on around her. You might think about cognitive words as well. There might be certain types of thoughts happening here, like this is pointless, or I'll never get through this, thoughts of hopelessness. There might be no thoughts at all if you're that zoned out. So just note what types of thinking might happen in this place. And let's let go of that energy, and I'll let you all float back up to your ventral vagal space. So let's end on a high. So with the heading of ventral, you might think now of a time when you really felt in the flow of that ventral vagal energy, sense that everything's okay. Not necessarily wonderful or perfect, but you feel okay. The world is safe enough. You can move through it. And bring some of this to you from your core to your skin. And when you might think of a particular time where you were in a social situation where you really felt connected, or a time with a partner or something, you really felt in tune and belong. You might even be on your own, but you're just singing to the radio, having a nice bit of you time, and you feel okay. You feel safe. You're not anxious. You're not. You're with it. You're connected. You're grounded. And just when you're in that place, note what your body's like there. Is there any particular types of sensation that stand out? Any types of words you would use to describe where your body's at when you're in that place? This can be all the way up to feeling joy and laughter and energy and motivation, but it can also just be feeling calm and chilled and relaxed. What they have in common is that you just feel safe in yourself and in your environment. You might notice a few cognitive words as well. The types of thinking you have here. Maybe you have pleasant daydreams or can engage with friends in conversation. And we'll draw that invitation to close. Here's an example of someone else's map from Deb Dana. So in their sympathetic, they've written words like out of control, too much, confusing, overwhelming, angry, confrontational, ready to run. It's core beliefs about feeling crazy or toxic, that the world is unfriendly. Bottom of the ladder, we've got dark, foggy, fuzzy, silent, out of focus, cold, numb, helpless, hopeless, unlovable, invisible, lost, alone, cold, empty. Top of the ladder, we got flow, connection, warmth, open-hearted, curious, engaged, capable, organized, okay, welcoming, opportunity. So we've got flow, chaos, and darkness as they've been summarized. So I think I'll pause here to allow any of you to share your experience or reflection if you want to on how that was for you, what you got from it or not. So that comment, I guess, leads nicely on to, so what's the relevance of this in psychotherapy? What do you guys, when you've had that experience now of mapping your own nervous system and you've understood a bit about the theory, how do you think this might actually apply to psychotherapy? What comes to mind? So through the chapters of Deb's book, this would be kind of like the first exercise, just get to know your nervous system. And the next one would be, okay, so what are the triggers in your life what would take you from ventral to sympathetic, or what's taken you from sympathetic to dorsal, and then what are the moments where you've climbed back up, what's happened there. So you start mapping out. You don't have to do this so formally as getting a piece of paper. You might not even explain the theory necessarily, but you're noticing where the client's triggers are in terms of what takes them to different parts of the nervous system, and finding out what it is that actually takes them up, and perhaps being able to utilize that. So although it's an involuntary system, that we can sort of claim more control by it. Can we speak to a friend to help come out of the dorsal place? Or that reminds me, the other day I went a bit dorsal, I think, and I whacked on a stand-up show on Netflix, and such a simple thing. It's no rocket science, but it's can just sort of, it forcing you to laugh in that way just drags you back up your nervous system to a point where you can assess, okay, what was actually going on there? Because when you're in that dorsal place, you can't really reflect properly because you're in a life-saving mode. So I've got no magic pills for how to take yourself through the ladder, but that's something you can explore with your clients and get them to let you know, well, this takes me up and this takes me down, and work with that. So when I started brainstorming how this can be used in therapy, so I think first and foremost, we can use it for ourselves. We can, like pointed out, there are some situations where we might be anxious going into session, whether it's because it's new and unknown, or whether it's a client who just has that effect on us, or if we're feeling de-skilled and not sure what we're doing. Just noticing where our own nervous system's going. It's like, okay, I'm speaking quite fast. I think I've been explaining this psychoeducation in a rushed way. I think I'm going a bit sympathetic. Just slow down, take a breath. So we can use it firstly and foremost for ourselves as therapists to help us be in the ventral vagal space, because that's where secure bases lie, right? If you're in your sympathetic or your dorsal, you can't really be a secure base in that moment for your client. So learning about your own nervous system and how to be in that place for them, so you can be tuned, engaged with them, and then as a effect of that, the client can learn to find the social engagement safety in the therapeutic relationship. So that might be a kind of longer term process if someone with an insecure attachment style, or a history of relationships not being safe at all. A bit of longer term work would be like through the core conditions or whatnot, they can eventually find you to be a place where they can get into the ventral vagal system where they might not elsewhere in their life. And as you pointed out, psychoeducation, so you can teach them this stuff if you want. Helps them raise their awareness to where they are on the ladder at different times. It gives you kind of a shared language to use as well with your clients. And they can use that process to self-regulate by knowing where the triggers are and what helps them climb back up, whether it's watching TV or taking a breath or whatever it might be for them. It could be de-shaming to share psychoed, because if you never knew what anxiety was, or you feel guilty that you withdrew in your relationship, you can learn that, well, that's an involuntary process. You neuro-received some threat. It wasn't your choice. That just happened. Kind of takes the shame out of it, perhaps. And this might also be a helpful tool for insights into your history of your nervous system. As a child, what was your home life a place where you could be ventral a lot of the time? Was your school life somewhere where you could be in the ventral vagal system? What relationships could you find the ventral place in, or were you more anxious, or did you have to kind of withdraw to survive certain environments? So that's just a brainstorm, really, of how this could be used. This is something Stephen Porges said about the relationship. As responsible humans, sensitive parents, good friends, mentors, and clinicians, we need to listen to our own body's responses and respect the responses of others as we help ourselves and others navigate in an inherently dangerous world. to find safe environments and trusting relationships. So I guess what I took from that is I can tune into my own experience to help regulate myself, and then I can also be tuning into my client's experience. So if in session I notice, a good example today, actually, I had a client came in, described that she's only recently got out of bed, and it was, early afternoon, and she was feeling low and slow, lacking motivation. I'm twigging, thinking, okay, she's been in dorsal. Starts explaining the situation to me, and starts getting a bit teary and angry about situations. I'm like, okay, she's climbing up the ladder. That's good. Like you might think, oh no, my client's crying and they're angry. That's bad. But I'm seeing that she finds this relationship trusting enough that she can go from dorsal to sympathetic with me, situation the other day where I asked a question and I saw the client kind of zone out a bit, and we didn't have long to go in the session. I was like, oh crap, I can't leave the session with him in his dorsal place. So I was like, I won't continue probing down that avenue, but I just sort of tuned back into him, asked him, we'd done stuff before about mindfulness, so asked him to sort of point out 3 things in his room, 3 things in my room, the colour of my top, and it just got him back into the place of social safety before we entered the session. So those types of things can help. Like I said at the start, autonomic's involuntary. However, our breath is autonomic, but we can choose to take control of it. So you can't choose to change your digestion, but you can choose what to do with your breath if you want to. You can slow it down, you can speed it up, you can grab control out of it. So this is one pathway into our autonomic nervous system, which we can use to regulate ourselves, which is pretty cool. It's like the key to our involuntary nervous system. So I've got a program here called Breath Ball, which I'm just going to load up, which allows you to kind of set the length of an in-breath and an out-breath and guides you to breathe along with it. So I'm going to invite you all to do that, just so we end the session in the ventral place. If you don't want to, if it's not comfortable, because I've chosen 7 seconds in, 11 seconds out. So a slow out breath gets us into our ventral. It might be too long for some people, so if it's uncomfortable, I apologize, but it seems to be a good middle ground for people. So just 1 minute of breathing before the end, if you're all happy to give that a go. So can you see my screen at the moment, the white screen with the orange button? Cool. So I'll let the program guide you. So if we probably all start with an out breath, and then we go. Here we go. Anyone notice any change in the nervous system through that 1 minute of breathing? Yeah, I certainly did, but I've been in a bit of a sympathetic place with performing and giving a presentation and all. So they say that because the out breath is like a polyvagal, got my words confused, a parasympathetic breath. So that's why they make the out breath longer than the in breath. Because when we're in our sympathetic, we tend to be like pant with our in breaths, and So yeah, the 7-11 is a common one, but you can make it, 5-9 or something. Give it a go. Well, thank you everyone for joining me today. I really appreciate your feedback and insights. It really helps drive these things and learn from your experience as well.